Could you confirm that you're looking to lay off 8 to 10,000 employees, and just give us a rough number? What is the total strength in terms of number of employees?
So Parle directly and indirectly employs about 1 lakh people. We have about 10 of our own manufacturing facilities and about 125 odd third-party manufacturing facilities across India. The current state of, if we talk about current state of affairs and current state of the industry, it's a difficult time for everybody. It's not just about Parle. I think the entire biscuit industry is going through a demand slowdown. It is more pronounced than, 5 rupee varieties, varieties like, which are typically sold at 100 rupees per kg and below.
Mr.
Like
Shah, we take your point on the consumption environment being very weak, but are you looking to lay off 8 to 10,000 employees?
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. See, it should be seen in the context and not really seen out of the context. What we are talking about it, we have not done that, but we might have to do that because of the slowdown. And what is the reason of the slowdown? We've taken a price hike some time back and coupled with, the slowdown in the industry, slowdown in the demand, we have seen a decline in the volumes. Now, what is happening is that if we talk about why we were to take a price hike and, what is the reason behind the dip or decline in the volumes. The thing is that if we talk about varieties which are sold at rupees 5 and below, typically they are the value biscuits, typically your glucose, Mari, milk. These are the varieties which are sold at rupees 100 and below. They are typically consumed by middle income class and lower income class. And earlier, these varieties were exempt from excise in the earlier tax regime. If you look at the current current GST rate, it is 18%. They are subject to a very high tax rate of 18%. If you look at adjacent categories like rusk, which are even higher priced, rusk is typically sold at 150 rupees per kg, but is only subject to 5% GST. So, ideally, when we talk about a revenue neutral rate, which was the principle and basis of moving categories to various GST slabs, government had to move, biscuits below 100 rupees per kg to a rate slab, which was like, 5% or so. But they have not done that. They have moved it, clubbed it with, biscuits which are very premium in nature, which are, let's say, 200, 300 rupees per kg, clubbed along with them, and, they have subjected it to 18% GST. As a result of that, players were forced to take a price hike. So this is something that we had discussed with government. We have time and again requested government to take, cognizance of the situation, reduce the GST on biscuits which are 100 rupees per kg and below, because they are the ones. I mean, what do you get at 100 rupees per kg in terms of processed food today? You don't get anything. Even a rusk is available at 150 rupees per kg. There is no other processed food which is available at 100 rupees per kg and below. These are the ones which are available and serving, middle class and lower middle class and lower income group people. I mean, if you are not taking, and this is something that we had talked to government, we have been praying to government, GST Council since inception of GST and when they moved this category to 18% GST slab. We have been talking to government on this, and they have, and it's not that they have not agreed to it. Government has agreed to it. They see a merit in it, but they have still not taken a call. So I think it's high time. We are very hopeful that PM is now getting personally into, ensuring that there is a revival in economy, there is a revival in demand. And it's a very just ask. See, we have never asked for reducing GST on all biscuits. I mean, we have been very fair in our ask. Biscuit industry has gone back to the government and told them that biscuits which are above 100 rupees per kg, we are fine with you subjecting them to 18% GST. It would be unfair on our part to come to you and ask for concessions there. But this is a case with a very high merit. These biscuits were exempted from excise earlier. Why are you subjecting it to such a high GST rate? Now, there was a merit in it. Government is agreeing to it, but, we are not seeing an action. Now with, Honorable Prime Minister coming into the picture, taking things in his hands, we are very hopeful that, GST Council and, Honorable Prime Minister will, take care of this particular issue, take care of, the middle income and the lower middle class of the consumers of our country and, ensure that the GST on biscuits below 100 rupees per kg would be reduced. If that happens, then I don't think there is an issue of layoff or anything, because,
Mr. Shah,
there will be a revival in demand.
You were saying that the fate of 8 to 10,000 employees of yours lies on the government cutting the GST rate or not.
Exactly. I mean, this is something, and it's not new. This is something that we have told government earlier. And it is very surprising why government is not taking an immediate action on it. So we are very hopeful now with, Honorable Prime Minister stepping, into this particular entire thing and taking in his hands the entire issue. He will definitely take, a note of it and take a concrete action.
Okay, all right. Mr. Shah, the sense we're getting is from you is that demand, yes, there is a slowdown. GST, yes, there is a problem. And if this, doesn't change or there's no cut in GST rates, then in fact you may have to lay off nearly around 8 to 10% of your total employee base, if I got that number right. 1 lakh people is...
Yeah, direct and indirectly employee base.
So 8 to 10% could be the layoff is...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If you could give us a few numbers in the first quarter, we just want to do a rough volume check, given that demand is so weak. What was the approximate volume growth number and some kind of forecast that you are working with going ahead?
Okay, so as per, our estimates, the first quarter, there was a growth in biscuit market of about 2.5%. Okay. However, if we look at the value segment, below 100 rupees per kg, there was a dip of almost about 8% in terms of, value. And above 100 rupees grew at about 7%. So, what we have been requesting government is that if you take a concrete action on this, then we'll see a revival, in total, in demand of total biscuits. So, the entire slowdown in demand is primarily driven by biscuits below 100 rupees per kg.
Right. Mr. Shah, it's interesting that you're making this pitch for GST. You said you had earlier done that as well, but the entire industry is doing that, be it the auto industry, etc. All of them are asking for GST rate cuts. What is it right now that propelled you to go ahead and take this step of reducing 8 to 10,000 of your employees, or perhaps not reducing them if the GST cut comes by? What is it that happened right now that is making you so aggressive on this job cut?
No, it's not a question of aggression. It's not a sudden thing. We have been talking about this thing since last 2 years. We have been talking about the consequences, slowdown in demand, dip in demand as a result of price hike, as a result of higher GST. We have been talking about it. There are two things which have happened simultaneously now. One is the GST has not been reduced. The input prices have been going up. So we were forced to take a price hike. We have taken a price hike. That has further reduced the demand. And the general mood of economy, which is, the sentiment is negative, has further added or, aggravated the situation. So both put together, there is a, there has been an, so in fact, the slowdown has acted as a catalyst. And you have seen, a dip in volumes to the tune of almost about 8%. Now, this is something that is not new. So, while we always anticipated a dip in demand because of the increase, these are extremely price-sensitive categories. So, we always anticipated a dip in demand. What has aggravated it is the slowdown. Now, this could have been taken care of if, and our GST ask is not new. I mean, we have been talking about it since last 2 years, as I said. Secondly, there is a difference between our ask of reduction in GST versus others. Others are asking reduction in GST for reviving the demand. We are saying it is rightfully due to us. See, if you look at how how this categories were assigned, a particular GST slab, the principle that was used was of revenue neutral rate. Now, if you talk about a revenue neutral rate, these biscuits were not subject to excise, 100 rupees per kg and below. How they have been moved to, 18% and clubbed it with other biscuits which were subject to excise earlier. So that is not right. So, I have a merit in my ask, and I'm only being just in asking for what was rightfully due to us. And not something, I am not asking for a special concession unlike others.
Mr. Shah?
Others are asking for a special concession where they are saying that, you reduce the GST so that we can sell more. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you put me in the rightfully due GST bracket. That is and I am the one who's going ahead, I'm putting my neck out and saying, okay, we are ready.
Mr. Shah, we get your point. Mr. Shah, we get your point. Now, if you could tell us from a consumption standpoint, can you give us the color of this slowdown? You said 8% decline in volumes. Where is it placed? At the lower end of the spectrum, in the non-biscuit performance? How are you doing out there? In the rural, urban, all these markets, how are you doing? If you could give us some color on this 8% volume decline that you've seen.
Yeah, so, that's primarily driven by the semi-urban and rural market. We have seen, more dip coming in from semi-urban and rural market. And honestly speaking, even in urban markets, in pockets, we have seen a dip. So ideally, going forward, I think, if we are able to manage that value equation, we will be able to get back the demand.
You know, Mr. Shah, we want to focus still on that 1 lakh people that you employ, and you're talking about 8 to 10% of that employee base getting cut if the GST, cut doesn't come about.
Yeah,
Give us a rough number. How many of them are direct employees?
Yeah, so about, we employ about 8 to 10,000 people are direct employees, and balance about, 90% people are indirectly employed by us through our third-party, associates.
So wait, 8 to 10,000 are the direct employees, and
Yes.
you're looking to cut 8 to 10,000 jobs. So how much of that is direct and how much of that is indirect?
No, that is not. That's still not finalized. It would happen eventually. If it's not that we are going to do that, we will do it, provided some measure is not taken immediately.
So in a sense, you're just threatening. The government to cut the GST rates. Otherwise, it would impact 8 to 10,000 jobs overall, both directly and indirectly. Is that what you're doing?
No, I don't think. I think that's not a threat. That's
Making a strong pitch.
No, that's a legible ask. And I told you, I am reiterating that it is rightfully due to you. If you have been placed in a higher GST slab than what you were taxed at, and if government always talked about revenue neutral rate, this is not revenue neutral rate. So it is a fair ask, it is a legitimate ask, it's a legible ask, and I don't see there is anything, it is.
But didn't you enjoy because of GST as well?
No, just a minute. No, I would like to clarify this.
Please go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Shah, please tell us.
See, if I would have done this 2 years back, it would have been straight. I have almost suffered for 2 years, okay, with a intention, not taking price hike till almost about 8 months back. For almost 1 year and 4 months, I did not take a price hike with, a very positive, this thing.
Mr. Shah, I take your point on not taking a price hike. That was also because of anti-profiteering.
I will disagree to that statement. This is an outcome of, a delayed action. I would put it that way than anything else.
Okay, Mr. Shah, before we wind down on this conversation, you're saying that GST in the last couple of years has crippled the industry to some extent. Demand as well is slowing down. But tell us, because of implementation of GST, you should have gained some market share from the unorganized market, right? That didn't happen?
No, that didn't happen. That has not happened because, what we have seen is that when GST came in, the expectation was that, the unorganized segment, would probably, get wiped off. That has not happened. In fact, it has flourished. It has thrived. Because what is happening is that the cash is back in economy, and the quantum of cash in economy is higher than what it used to be prior to demonetization. So there has been no impact of, GST rollout on the unorganized segment. Secondly, I would also like to add one more point. See, let's try and understand what is the demand of the industry. The industry has gone ahead and told government to subject biscuits above 100 rupees per kg at 18% GST. We are not against that. We are the ones who have said government continue taxing biscuits above 100 rupees per kg at 18%. We are fine paying that. There is no issue there. But biscuits which are below 100 rupees per kg cannot be taxed at the same rate. There has to be a differential tax rate for both of them.
So
and that's the reason why I'm saying, it is a very fair ask. It's a very legitimate ask.
So short point that you're making a pitch. It's a threat in a way that if the government doesn't reduce the GST rates, 8 to 10% of the employee base, they lose their jobs.
It's interesting what he's saying, that they haven't gained any market share because we've had the competitors, the likes of Britannia, ITC, all of them saying that GST has actually been good for them and they've gained some market share from the lower end of the spectrum. So let's see how really that pans out, primarily because, all the other players have been gaining market share. And this is, like you said, it's a bit of a threat. So we'll watch out for how that pans out.
If there is some action or not. Well, thanks so much, Mr. Shah, for joining in, giving us your quick take as well. We look forward to speaking to you in the coming weeks, in the coming months, as well as the coming quarters, if there is some action, or I fear if there isn't any action as well.
Absolutely, if there isn't any or not. But Nigel, thanks a lot, Mr. Shah, for joining in. On that note, actually, our appetite has been whetted, and from a consumption standpoint, all we can do is perhaps break into a cookie, maybe?
Yeah, I think maybe we could just go in for a biscuit on that note.
So, yeah, from our end, we are consuming, but, points from Parle well taken. They have indeed confirmed to us on CNBC-TV18 that there may be job losses of close to 8 to 10,000 employees.
Go for your biscuit, Mangalam.
All right, I'll go for my biscuit.